and welcome back to the Reapers. So we are in our final video in the series of our Fighters of the World. So we're doing this, we've done all of the columns basically, and we're now on this sixth and final column we're going to go through, and we're going to go through just briefly about each fighter. We're obviously not aviation experts or military experts, we're enthusiasts, so we're going to go and get information that we know and from the internet and whatnot, and just talk about them and about why the different planes were in service, when they were in service, what they could do, rough capabilities, and so on and so forth. After this, I'd love to go on and do another series about, I don't know, maybe bombers or something. If anyone out there is keen enough, has enough time, has enough energy to make a picture, 1080p picture like this for bombers, and send it to us, that would be much appreciated, and then we'll go and do that. If not, I'll try and cook something up at some point when I get a minute. Let's get on with it. Saunders Roe, that name to me says flying boats and British, question mark. What do we know about Saunders Roe and about the SR-53? A bit weird looking.
The Saunders Roe SR-53 was a British prototype intercept aircraft. It mixed jet and rocket propulsion.
Wow. When was this in history? It was 1957. Right, okay, so this is post-Korean War. Saunders Roe made a rocket/jet interceptor, and is I know they made flying boats. Is this water-based or land-based? I'm guessing land-based because it's jet engine in.
It's land-based, I believe.
Okay, and what's interesting about this, was it super fast? Did it must have carried missiles. What missiles did it carry and how fast did it go?
2 de Havilland Firestreak infrared missiles.
And we got speed on this thing.
Mach 2.2.
Oh, now we're cooking on gas. So this is what it was all about.
However, it could only last 7 minutes at full power.
So it was designed to zoom, climb, and shoot down nuclear bombers. That's what I'm hearing, basically, in the Cold War.
Yeah, it could from brakes, it could reach 50,000 feet in 2 minutes and 12 seconds.
Right. So it was just turn your rockets on, turn your jet engines on, and just go and shoot down that bomber by the side. This is interesting. I didn't know this thing. I'm guessing this never made it into service. It was prototype only. Am I right?
No, they only built 2 of them.
2 of them, yeah. Right. Okay. They should have made it. It's awesome. A Mach 2.2 zoom thing. It's like that old the Messerschmitt. What was it? The not 262, 16.
The 163.
163. It's just designed to go up, shoot down a couple of Lancasters or super fortresses and flying fortresses, and then run out of fuel and then kind of glide down to land. It's almost like that.
Yeah, but that thing probably killed more pilots than it actually killed enemies. Also, it was built as a glider, so it could actually get home without fuel. This thing doesn't look like it can.
No, it doesn't. But what it does look like is if you go left 3 columns and down to the bottom, you'll see something called a Starfighter. The front is almost a carbon copy of the Starfighter. The wings look Starfighter-ish, and the high raised T-tail is very Starfighter-ish. It's almost like a Starfighter with 7 feet cut out of the middle, a punier engine, and a rocket booster. It's almost
generally fatter.
And fatter, yeah. Okay, well, that's an interesting plane. Anyone got anything to add? Anything interesting about this SR-53? Okay, that's fine. That's an interesting bit of beautiful British history. Next, we have an SRA/1. Now remember, this is fighters, okay? This is everything in here is a fighter or a fighter bomber, but mainly a fighter. What is that doing in my fighter video?
That is the flying boat you were talking about.
Yes, indeed.
Right. So why is it okay? Someone tell me when this thing existed.
Post World War II, shortly after first flight.
1947.
1947. So just after the World War. So we're coming into the jet era. Is it a jet? It's a jet, isn't it? Yeah, it's a jet.
Yes, it is.
It's a jet flying boat.
It had 2 times Metropolitan Vickers Barrel MVB.2 turbojets.
A couple of turbojets, and I'm guessing some guns only. Yeah, it'll be guns only, won't it?
Guns and bombs. 4 times 20mm Hispano Mark Vs.
Same things as on the Spitz. Okay. And I don't really understand why, because the aircraft carriers were a thing at this point. I know maybe the British didn't have them, I can't remember. Maybe that's why we needed a fighting flying boat.
A unique attempt at combining fighter-like capabilities with the qualities of a flying boat.
Only the British could make something so stupid.
Well, to be fair, this thing was first flight was in 1947. At that time, jet engines really sucked for accelerating from low speeds. So whether you could actually make it off a carrier with a jet like this is questionable.
Roger.
Yeah, it only had 0.48 thrust to weight.
Wow, that's pretty pathetic. So that was a real trundler. So I wouldn't, if I came in my Messerschmitt or whatever was out at that time, I wouldn't mind bumping into this piece of crap. All right, so that's straight wing technology, a couple of turbojets. What's the power on the motors, dare I ask?
3,850 pounds each.
Nice. And what we've got a top speed of 200 knots.
445.
Wow, that's actually more than I thought it was going to go. Right. Okay. Well, I'm laughing at it, but maybe it was really good. Maybe I'll get to see one in real life, and I'll be in awe of how cool it actually is. So I don't know. We'll see. All right.
It could fly in circles for hours.
Now here's what we're interested in. So longevity, which is a big thing, especially over an ocean fighter. So could we say, guys, maybe this was anti-submarine as well? Maybe it had because that loiterability was important with anti-submarine.
Maybe. I know it was a bomber.
Okay. Well, we don't know a huge amount of this. Anyone in the comments knows more about this? It'd be interesting. Anyone to add to the SRA one before we sign off?
It could carry 2,000 pounds of bombs, as I see.
Was that a lot at the time? Let's think. So Spitfire can carry 1,000 pounds. No, yeah, Spitfire carries 1,000 pounds. So I guess it's meh.
I think they were thinking the Pacific Ocean long missions.
Yeah, I think it's this long longevity kind of fighter / bomber thing, isn't it? By the sounds of it. All right, guys.
Also, the fact that if you do run out of fuel, you can still, go swimming.
Go swimming and get someone to ship some barrels of gasoline out to you. All right, very good. Now let's move on to a very sexy-looking plane. Just the fact that it's got missiles on top of the wings is cool, right? So this must be a fighter bomber. I'm aware of its existence. I'm aware that the British used it, but I don't really know a lot about it. It's called the Septercat. So I can never say that. Is it Sepercat or Septercat? I can't really read it. Sepercat, isn't it? And the Jaguar Mark 1A. Someone kick off. When are we in history? When was its first flight?
68.
68. So it's fairly late. And when did it end service?
2003.
2005 in France, 2007 in the UK, 2014 in Oman, and it's still active in India.
So massive history. So it's a successful fighter bomber by the sounds of it. I'm guessing as for hardware, anti-air hardware, I'm guessing it was just sidewinded. So I'm guessing it didn't have a acquisition radar or anything. Anyone know any different?
It carried the AS-37 Martel anti-radar missile.
So seed weapon, yeah.
It carried an AS-30L laser-guided air-to-ground missile and 2 times R-550 Magic air-to-air missiles.
Magic. So this is French/English. So Septercat, was that was a French-English conglomerate, or was that just French?
French-English. And to add, just because the last video we had mentioned this a lot, it was capable of carrying nuclear weapons.
Of course it was. It was in the
2
60s.
times.
Two
Yeah,
times
2
nuclear
times
weapons.
WE-177A nuclear bomb or 1 AN-52 nuclear bomb.
Well, that's standard. I mean, back in the 60s, the Cessnas took nuclear weapons. Everything took nuclear weapons. It's crazy.
I mean, during World War II, those seaplanes, they would go up in the air from the Florida coast and drop grenades if they ever saw submarines.
Okay, let's just hash down into some figures a bit. Can we talk about the engines? Are they afterburning turbofans / jets? What have we got then? What's their power?
2 Rolls-Royce Turbo Mecha Adore Mark 120 turbofans. And they did have afterburner.
And what are they rated at?
They're Mark 102.
Okay. What
What I said.
You said
what are they rated
Yeah,
at?
at afterburner, it produces 7,300 pounds of thrust each.
Pretty puny, tiny little motors then, pretty puny things. Okay, but it was a small jet. Okay, and I'm guessing this thing didn't go very fast. It doesn't look very fast. Can anyone confirm the top speed?
Mach 1.6.
1.6.
Very fast.
Okay, it's pretty fast. It's just tiger fast, supersonic. That's actually pretty impressive. Okay, and let's talk about the most important thing. Why did this thing exist? What was the gap in the market? What was it designed to do? Is it the equivalent of the F5, or what do we think?
It drops nukes.
I don't see.
From what I understand, it was
Yeah.
designed as a multi-role fighter. It was. They wanted trainers, they wanted bombers, and just an overall fighter that could fill a lot of different roles. And overall, it was very successful at what it did.
Absolutely.
No, from what I'm reading, it was a British-French attack jet aircraft originally, and it was used in the close air support role and nuclear strike role.
Roger. Okay, interesting. With regards to layout, it's conventional front wing, rear elevon, single tail, twin engine. It reminds me a bit of the Mirage. Is it the Mirage F1? Or have I got that wrong? Yeah, there's the Mirage F1. It's kind of, maybe a little bit, kind of not. Okay, anything to add on the Jaguar?
It had 2 times 30mm cannons.
Ooh, that's good. That sounds very French.
And the French Navy attempted to put these on carriers, but they only got as far as to build 1 prototype.
Okay, and did it have rough terrain takeoff? I remember seeing images of these, like the Vigans, taking off from roads and stuff. I think it had rough terrain takeoff capabilities, as far as I'm aware, at least to an extent.
I believe most jets do, Cap. Well, at least most modern ones, because I've seen videos of the Air Force here in the U.S. practicing landing on highways and roads.
Okay, fair play. All right, anyone else in the comments know more about the Jaguar? Let us know. Anything else before we sign off on the Jaguar? Right, let's move on to Shenyang. Now, I first heard about Shenyang with the J11A in DCS World. It's essentially a copy of the one of the Su-20, one of the flanker variants, basically. A copy of the Su-27 or something like that. But we've got a couple of earlier versions here. So Shenyang is Chinese, right? Am I right?
Yep.
Okay, and we've got now I may be reading this wrong. Is that a J8 and a J8?
It's
Yes.
a J8 and a J8-2.
So you've got a fin
Well,
back.
they're the A and B versions technically, but yeah.
Oh, they look completely bloody different. And I've heard rumours that this is a copy of a MiG-21, the first version. Is that right, or do we think?
No, that would be the J7 actually. It was a reverse engineered MiG-21.
Oh, so these are freshly engineered things then. I was going to say, because they don't look like anything, well, that I'm aware of. Maybe.
Yeah, they looked like a fatter MiG-21.
Okay.
If you look in media, here's a really good picture on Wikipedia from top down, and you can see the MiG-21 resemblance.
We've got a picture in me. So we've got a picture in media here. That is the Shenyang J8, and that is the Shenyang J8-2. Oh, right. Okay. So they are MiG-21E from the top, aren't they? No, they're twin engine. That's an interesting thing. Okay, right, so we're slowly hashing down into this. Let me get back to my picture. Twin engine. Let's start talking about some figures. So, first of all, dates for the Finback 1. When was its service? When was its first flight and service date?
69.
69. And was that its first flight?
Yep, it was introduced in 1980.
Okay, and so it seems a bit out of touch because we had F-15Cs were nearly coming into service around this time, so it does seem awfully out of date, doesn't it? So what have we got there? Twin engines. What power are they? Give us a ballpark figure of what we've got here for the Finback 1.
Well, Wikipedia actually only gives you data for the Finback 2.
Okay, let's do the Finback 2. When was that? When does that first flight and when did it enter service?
84.
84. Oh, is that service? Yeah, it must be. Yeah. Okay.
First flight.
First flight, yeah.
Really? So we're well out of touch because it looks old.
Yeah, they say it was interrupted by the Cultural Revolution. It was actually they started design in the late 60s, but it took a while to get it out.
Okay, so it's a bit late, but let's run with it. So it's kind of MiG-21 style Delta-ish front wing type situation. It's twin engine. What do those engines output? Were they turbofans? Let's see what
They were 2 WP-13B turbojets, and at Afterburner they produced 15,432 pounds each.
pretty weak then, by the sounds of things.
Well, it's actually pretty interesting. I mean, this thing was limited to Mach 2.2, but supposedly, they estimated that it could go above 2.4.
Wow.
But apparently it was just not safe.
It wasn't limited. They don't say limited. They say never
But I'll never
exceed.
exceed speed, yes.
Yeah, okay, so it didn't have the metals, by the sounds of it, to go in here. So it's a weird thing. It's out of date-ish by the sounds of it, at least by its looks. It's underpowered, yet it's really fast. None of this is really correlating to me, but okay. I'm guessing it was extremely aerodynamic. This is all I can think. And what was it? Was it an intercept fighter or an air superiority fighter? I'm guessing intercept by the looks of it.
Interceptor and fighter bomber, as far as I've seen as well.
Fighter bomber, whopping great anti-spin. Dorsal. Look at the size of that. That must fold up on landing. Otherwise, there's no way that thing could land. Hugely swept back tail. So, twin engine. What kind of missiles does this thing fire then? And does it have a big radar?
The early versions only had our missiles, but later on they actually got a better radar, even with look-down shoot-down capabilities. So they must have had radar missiles.
Okay.
PL2 or PL7 missiles.
It sounds like they were trying to catch up to the West then, by the sounds of it. But they were a couple of decades behind. It sounds like kind of MiG-21 tech and, and MiG-27 tech and that kind of era.
Yeah, at this era it was still cheap Chinese copy, still meant cheap Chinese copy, while nowadays the cheap Chinese copies are better than the Russian ones.
Interesting. Okay, well, that's an interesting time in history. I don't know anything about these. Anything to add that might be interesting?
They also added a reconnaissance version and a fly-by-wire system.
Roger. I should hope so in the 1980s. Okay, cool. One thing to note is the raw size of these things. Assuming this picture's just about right, we're way bigger than an F-15. Look, we're bigger than an F-14. That's the size of this thing. Absolutely enormous. So it really was a thunder chunky.
Yeah, its length was 70 feet 7 inches,
Whoa.
and its wingspan was 30 feet 8 inches.
Yeah, my old parents' house was 32 feet long, so that's more than twice the length of my old parents' house, which was a big four-bedroom house. So what a big thumping unit of a thing that was. It must have weighed a ton. All right, interesting bit of history there. Let's move on, guys. Now, what does that word say? Sud-est? What is that?
Yeah, it's Sud-Est Aquilon, but in reality, that's just the French name for it. It was licensed to be beat by SN Case, but in reality, it's the de Havilland Sea Venom.
Okay, I'm looking now. I've now found it. We looked for de Havilland on the second column. We've got something called a Vampire and something called a Venom, and they look very similar. So what's this, a twin boom tail, early 50s, late 40s?
Yeah, it was 1951, its first flight. It was a UK jet, and it served with both Royal Navy, the Fleet Air Arm, and Royal Australian Navy.
Okay, well, we've already covered the Vampire and the Venom in the first vid by the looks of things, so we'll move on, but okay. Now, this is, I think, something new, question mark, Sud Awert Valor, anyone?
Ventour. It's the Sud Aviation Ventour. It's French.
It's French again, and
Yeah.
it doesn't look like anything as far as I can see, so what time in history is this, do we know?
It was introduced in 58.
58, okay, and it's a fighter. It's got, looks like engines, either nacelles on the side of the fuselage or possibly pylons on the wing. It looks like a rough sweep wing, so it seems a bit out of date to me by the looks of it. What was its capabilities? What were those engines, first of all?
Well, it was both a bomber, interceptor, and attack aircraft, and it had a 2 times Snecma Atar
yeah.
101E3 turbojets that had 7,710 pounds of thrust each.
So it's pretty. It sounds 10 years behind the times, but okay. What top speed is this thing? So I can get an idea.
Mach 0.9.
So subsonic, 1958. What kind of ordnance do we have? Do we have any air-to-air ordnance? I'm guessing we did.
4 times 30 millimeter guns.
No missiles. There were Mark 1 Sidewinders by this point. In fact, there were Mark 2 Sidewinders by this point, so I'm surprised it didn't have any missiles. Okay, and I'm guessing a bunch of dumb bombs, is that right?
Yeah, it could carry 6,000 pounds of bombs. It could pack rockets, and it says it could carry missiles or napalm tanks as well.
Okay.
However, it doesn't specify which missile.
It's probably ground attack missiles.
Ground attack missiles. Has anyone got any redeeming features about this? It just seems a bit behind. I mean, this French, I'm not saying the French have bad planes, they have great planes. It just seems a bit behind the times by a few years, and is there something special about this?
Well, I mean, it's special in that it has a thruster weight of 0.4.
Wow, that is special. That's what a dog to fly that must be. Give me a top speed, someone.
Mach 0.9.
Oh, sorry.
Looks like another loitering aircraft.
Yeah, it doesn't look like a performance aircraft in any way, does it? All right, well...
It was swept wing.
Yeah, I see that. Okay. All right, fair enough. Let's sign off for that one then. Right, Sukhoi. Russian Sukhoi Bureau. So we had several bureaus in Soviet Russia. We had Mikoyan, MiG. We had Tupolev. We had Yak. We had Sukhoi. I'm guessing most of these were formed around World War II. Some, well, I'm sure that's wrong. I'm sure someone way before. I haven't looked that up at all. But all I'm trying to get to is that it was one of the big boy bureaus, and it had a huge successful history. So as you can see, look at all these fighters we're going to go through. We're going to plough through them. We're not going to spend too much time on them. Maybe a bit more time when we get to the later versions. So let's kick off. Well, in fact, first of all, does anyone have any interesting thing to say about Sukhoi as a whole, about the man, or anything about the bureau or anything? I don't know a lot about it.
They had plenty of prototypes.
Yeah, I'm sure they did. Right, well, let's kick off with the Su-9. So this, to me, looks like stolen tech from the Me-262. Is that correct, or is it coincidence? And what do we know about this Su-9?
It was most likely stolen tech from the Me-262 because its first flight was in '46. It was a prototype aircraft and only 2 were made.
They did. I'm right in saying that the Russians got the 262, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
They did.
Yeah, it says it was influenced by captured German jet
Absolutely.
fighters.
So it sounds like that. Okay, so so it's going to have some machine guns on it or some cannons on it. It's going to have some earlier, I guess, axial flow, pretty inefficient jets on it. What do we know about those jets and the power they were kicking out at the time?
2,000 pounds each.
2,000 pounds each, and this obviously subsonic straight wing tech by the looks of it. What kind of speed were we kicking on here?
Mach 0.72.
Mach 0.7, yep, so it all sounds about right. Okay, so it was a thing, but it was never in service for whatever reason. Maybe they chose the equivalent MiG or something, I'm not sure, but okay. Let's skip on to the Su-11. Does that say Samurai? I'm struggling to I can't really read it.
Samoyed.
Okay, this looks, to be honest, the same. Did it make it to service?
It was another prototype.
Just another prototype, right? Okay, what's different?
Yeah.
Is it a bit faster? And what
It had an afterburning RD-10.
That's interesting. So it's essentially a similar thing by the looks of it with afterburners. So give me the power of those motors now. We've got some old afterburners on it.
3,300 pounds each.
And a Mach.
No, it actually produced 2,865 pounds, but it was required to have 3,300, so I think that's why it didn't make it into service.
Okay, out of interest, have we got a top speed of this prototype?
580 miles per hour.
Oh god, I can't do that in my head, but it sounds Mach 1.8-ish, 1.8, a straight wing again by the looks of it, so they're not going to get much faster than that. Okay, that's another bit of history then. Next, we have possibly the ugliest plane ever made. It's called an Su-15. No, what is that number? 15? 13? Samolet? Okay, I think it's 15, so let's go with 15. What is this? It's the first. It looks like the first attempt at having an internal engine. A weird looking intake at the front. What do we know about the Su-15? Someone P.
It was a prototype all-weather interceptor.
Was it in service ever?
Nope. First flight 1949, and one was made.
Oh dear, lots of prototypes. Oh, I'm guessing that's why they're coloured white, because they were prototypes. They didn't have any service. Okay, well let's carry on because this is all interesting stuff. Give me an output on that engine, and is it a single engine?
2 engines at 5,000 pounds each.
5,000 pounds, so 10,000 pounds. So we're cooking on some gas here for 1949. Do we have a speed on this bird?
Mach 0.926.
So we're transonic now. Okay. So we're trying to compete with the Sabre and whatnot. It looks like a slight sweep on the wing there. What else? Anyone else? This is before missiles, obviously. So this is guns only. What guns have we got? And anyone got anything interesting to add to this? Samulet P.
237mm cannons.
So sounds very Russian to me.
By the way, I think Samoyed in Russian just means aircraft, if I'm not mistaken, so that's probably just how they designated their prototypes. That's why they all have the same name with different letters.
I see. Samulet K, Samulet LK, Samulet P, Samulet R. Roger. Right, let me just go and check I'm still recording, because it does have a tendency to turn itself off. We are still recording. Thank you very much. Whoops. Just got rid of it by accident, so we're going to go full screen. Right, okay, so we're working our way through these early Sukhoi prototypes. Next we have an Su-15 Samolo, I can't say it, Samolo, that word, Romeo. What have we got here? Looks like 2 afterburning engines, question mark? It looks like a MiG-15 tail. Look at the big sweep on that tail. That's interesting. Not sure why that is, but that's a thing for some reason.
It seems there are a lot of Su-15s.
Right.
Yes, there are.
So we're struggling to get internet data on the Su-15 Samulet R, but it doesn't seem much of a thing really. Again, it's just another prototype. So let's Cap have a guess then. I'm going to say it's 1951. We've got sweep wing. It's competing with the MiG 15 and 17, possibly the MiG 15. It's got, I'm guessing, an afterburning motor, about 8,000 pounds of thrust, and it could go Mach pretty much around just touching on supersonic, I'm guessing. That's pure guess. Right, I'm guessing we haven't got any more info on it.
No.
Okay. Okay, well, it's an interesting piece in history. If anyone's got some more info on this in the comments, please let us know, because we're just here to try and get people talking, really, at the end of the day. That's what we're doing. Okay, let's carry on, guys. We've got an Su-7. Can anyone read the word? Fitter, question mark?
Fitter 8.
Fitter.
Yeah, it's fitter.
Oh, yeah, right, because there's a fitter coming to Riot this year, but it's actually 22. Right, so was this a service? It looks like a service
Yeah,
thing.
this was in service.
Right, so can we have first flight and its service length, the service, thing, please?
First flight was in 55, introduced in 59, and it had limited service with Korea.
Right, interesting. So it looks like we've got a big sweep on that wing. I see big, in the middle there, I can see on the picture it's got big wing fences, anti-slip wing fences. That usually means it's got a big sweep on the wing, which is okay. So it's got a front sweep wing, rear elevon or elevator, probably elevon. We've got 1 or 2 motors at the back.
1.
And what is it? Afterburning turbofan, I'm guessing, of what power?
Afterburning turbo.
Turbojet.
Turbojet, and what power?
22,150 pounds of thrust.
Pretty good then, because it's nearly as powerful as an F-15 engine of the mid-1970s. So it's a pretty interesting spec plane. It's a big plane by the looks of it. As you can see, it's comparable size to the F-15, assuming this is an accurate drawing. What performance have we got? How fast is this thing going?
Mach 0.94.
Really? Not supersonic?
It actually was supersonic.
Okay, well, you've said 2 different things there, so which is true?
Yeah, 9.4 is at sea level.
Right, yeah, okay, so do we know how fast it is up high?
1.74.
My figure says 1,915 kilometers.
What was
2,150 kilometers.
Yeah, at high altitude it was Mach 1.7.
Ah, there we go. Right, thank you. We got that. So, right, at low altitude it was subsonic, but at high altitude 1.74. So we're really cooking on gas now. And did you say first flight 1959 was that?
First flight was in
55.
55, sorry. So this is comparable to MiG-21. It sounds like this is MiG-21 or slightly before possibly. Okay, and it sounds capable. 1.74 at the time was pretty sweet, to be honest. And you can see that we've got the speed. You can see we've got a nose spike in there. You can see the early subsonic planes didn't have the nose spike, and this was more likely than not to a movable spike to offer ourselves some variable inlet geometry to slow the air down to the compressor of the engine, and that's proof basically of that they can go so fast. So everything's adding up. So at the time, very early IR Russian missiles? Question mark.
It can carry the K-13M, the R-60, and R-73A.
Yes, and yep, R73A. So okay, yeah, interesting. So yeah, we did have the earlier versions of the Russian IR missiles, so it seems quite capable. I'm guessing it didn't have a radar and it didn't have radar-guided missiles. I doubt it would have. Can anyone confirm that for me?
No, I don't believe it had a radar, but it did have anti-radiation missiles.
So some early seed missiles then. Interesting. It's an interesting plane. Didn't know it existed.
There's a prototype with a radar built, probably later on.
Probably later on, yeah, it sounds like it. And it sounds like limited history. Again, we're at the point of history where the arms race in the Cold War was so tight that, you know, as soon as a plane was out, it was already being superseded by its next generation 2 years later. So service histories were markedly small at this point as tech was moving on so fast. But I find that an interesting plane. Maybe that's something we'd like to petition for to have in DCS, or maybe we'll have a look at some of these next generation ones. Anything to add on this SU-7 before we move on?
1,847 were built over 15 years.
So it actually did have a relatively big service history for the time, and that is a lot of birds made. And now, bear in mind, I didn't know it even existed. That's a real sizable chunk of history going in there for Russian Air Force. So, well done, SU-7 Fitter A in that case. Interesting. Okay, let's move on, guys.
Yeah, some of those were like the SU-7Bs.
SU-7Bs, yeah. So, yeah, and whenever we talk about these planes, obviously they were, you know, continually developed. So we have to talk like an F-15. Obviously, there were various versions over decades, basically, but we have to kind of conglomerate them into one just for the sake of this video. But okay, that's fine. Let's move on, guys. We've got an SU-9. Can anyone read that? Fishpot.
Fishpot.
What an interesting name. So again, it's a bit like the Wombat. It's not a very dangerous sounding name, but was it a dangerous aeroplane? It looks like a slightly modified version of the SU-7. What engine have we got in here? No, let's start with the basics. When was its first flight, and what was its service history?
First flight in 56, introduced in 59, retired in the 70s.
Right, so it's literally just following on a year or a couple of years after the SU-7. What was better about this? What motor did it have on board?
It had a Lyuka AL7 turbojet that had 19,840 pounds of thrust.
So it's less powerful than the SU-7, which is an interesting thing, but there might be they might have been reporting on different versions there, so it may be something to do with versions as why that's more powerful than this. So we'll take that with a pinch of salt. Do we have, interestingly, a high altitude top speed of this?
Yes.
Mach 1.73.
It's essentially the same.
It does sound, everything sounds the same as the one above, basically. Okay, before we go any further, do we have anything interesting, any interesting differences?
Yeah, the wing is a bit different. It really is reminiscent of a MiG-21 from the top down.
Oh, so it's Delta.
Yeah, it does look a lot like a MiG-21.
Right, so it's more MiG-21 shaped, and it is contemporary. In the timeline, it is MiG-21 kind of time-based. Speed's pretty much the same as the MiG-21, so it sounds like contemporary to that then. Okay, anything else interesting on the SU-9?
It had no guns.
Had no guns, so right, so they were really relying on their early missiles then, which obviously is a mistake, but...
4 times K5.
Yeah, I mean, you can understand why they wanted to get rid of guns at the time, right? It seemed like old tech. This was the time when nuclear bombs were a thing. It seemed old tech, the big heavy things. You've got to carry all that ammo, upsets the weight, balance of the plane. You can understand why they wanted to get rid of guns. But as we found out, obviously, you do need a gun. Even in the most modern of fighters, you need a gun. But okay, that's the thing. Anything else on the SU-9, chaps?
Yeah, as you found out, nuclear bombs are pretty good against airplanes, yeah?
Lols, yeah.
Yeah, but not so much against convoys.
And as we spoke earlier, in an earlier movie, 3 or 4, there were planes like that, Voodoo or other planes that had nuclear-tipped rockets, anti-aircraft nuclear-tipped rockets. You'd send it out, it would fly 2 or 3 miles, blow up, and just eviscerate the sky, and that's how they killed fighter planes, or were going to kill fighter planes. So it shows how prolific the nuclear use was at the time. Alright guys, that'll do for that. SU-11, can anyone read that? Fishpot C, is that?
Yep.
It looks the same. Now, interestingly, it looks a bit bigger. I get the feeling that might be just an error on the drawing. I don't know. What's different on this? Let's go timeline first of all.
Introduced in 64. Its first flight was in 58.
Wrong way round. So first flight in 58. Sorry, I got.
Yes, first flight in 58, introduced in 64.
Introduced 64, right? And so it is literally a year later, 2 years later. Okay. And what difference is this? What motor have we got?
A Lyuka AL7F1 turbojet at 21,164 pounds of thrust.
It's even less powerful again. And we've got top speed on this bird.
Mach
Mach
2.2.
2.2.
Ah, so now we're cooking on gas. So I'm guessing it's not the engine, it's more. So I'm guessing an engine is configured, so it doesn't have the raw output of the other ones, but it's configured probably for high speed more or high altitude. So we've got over Mach 2 now, and in a first flight, I missed it, 1958 or something, was it?
58.
Yes, 58.
So it's really cooking on gas then, isn't it? For its contemporary rivals, that's a fast, and speed was really the thing at the time. Everyone wanted the fastest fighter. What kind of wing is that, by the way? Is that a MiG-21 Delta wing, or is that a swept Lightning type wing?
Su-9 Delta Wing.
So that is, so that's a Delta wing. Okay, and I'm guessing missiles only. Is that
Yep,
right?
no guns again.
Right.
Radar guided K8 missiles.
Oh, so right. So we've got the first radar missiles coming in then. No doubt they were absolutely awful, like the MiG-21 missiles that we get, but they are a thing. And I'm guessing they were more designed for anti-bomber than anti-fighter, these missiles.
Yeah, it was an intercept aircraft.
Yeah, it sounds exactly what it sounds like. It was to shoot. Yep. I don't know what the contemporary US bomber was, B-36 or whatever it was. To zoom up, shoot that bomber down to stop it putting a nuke on Moscow, basically. So boom and zoom type affair. Probably couldn't maneuver for its life. So designed for a purpose. Okay, interesting piece of history this is. So we're working up very progressively from 1946. Year by year, Sukhoi are improving their fighters. Anything interesting about this Su-11?
It says it usually carried one radar homing and one infrared guided missile.
Wow, so they were really trusting on those missiles to hit those bombers then. One plane per bomber by the sounds of it.
108 were made between 62 and 65.
Cool. Alright. Another cool piece of history. Let's move on from the fish pot to the flagon. Anyone? Is that flagon?
Flagon.
Su-15 Tango Mike Flagon F. Right, so it looks not really like anything. So let's get the timeline on this.
It was
First flight 62.
introduced in 65.
So first for 62, introduced 65. Okay, I'm getting a picture of its contemporaries now with F4 Phantoms and stuff like that. Right. Was that twin engine, single engine? What are the engines?
Twin engine, I believe.
Twin engine, twin R13 300 turbojets that did go into afterburner and produced 15,730 pounds each.
Okay, so we've got 32,000 pounds of thrust here. Have we got a speed on this bird, a top speed?
Mach 1.81.
8.1 was that?
Yes.
Yes.
So it's a pretty fast bird, not as fast as the Fishbot C, but presumably not configured as much for that ultimate, just boom and zoom. What kind of wing have we got here? Is it variable geometry?
Delta.
Just another
Very
Delta.
similar again to the MiG-21.
So again, a MiG-21 type thing. It doesn't look from the MiG-21 from the side because it's got side intakes. Now I'm guessing that's because they got to put a big radar in it. So I'm guessing that is a search and acquisition radar, hence the big nose cone. Is that right?
Yeah, again, it could carry radar-guided missiles as well. K8 and R60 missiles.
Roger. So this is a point in history where we went from these this kind of square type nose with an intake spike, as you see. We can go see the other countries that had it. We've got the MiG-21 had it. We've got the English Electric Lightning had it. And I'm sure there's a whole bunch more that had this type. The Sabre and the Super Sabre had it. And then around the early kind of 60s, the big radar acquisition radars came out, so they had to get rid of that type of square front. Then they had to put a big nose cone for the big radar. They had to move to side intakes. So So that's where we are in history at the moment. Okay, we've got the top speed, we've got the engine, this thing, we've got relatively early radio-guided missiles with a relatively early acquisition radar. Now, one thing that surprises me, a contemporary, say, let's look at the F4 Phantom, has these early radars that are going to be hard to use. They're going to be knobs, they're going to be analog, so they had a radar officer in it. I wonder why guy didn't have a radar officer in it. You had one guy, by the looks of things, who had to be the pilot, who had to control probably a nasty-to-fly plane without avionics, fly-by-wire, and he had to control probably a nasty-to-control radar. Do we think that was overload for the pilot at the time? I bet it was.
It was autopilot. It was designed so the plane would fly autopilot while the pilot used the radar.
They relied heavily on the ground control radar to get them close to their target so that the pilot could use the radar missiles.
Yeah, at the time, the commies relied a lot on GCI.
These radars had no look-down capability at all.
Yeah, I mean, it probably wasn't that type of thing. Again, the thinking what probably was B-36s or whatever, B-52s coming over at Angels 30. That's probably what the thinking was, I'm guessing. But now we've got the ability to GCI them in, but also to search with our own big radar and search for them 40, 50 miles away. So I'm guessing that's what it was all about, the doctrine was at this time then. So
yeah, they relied very heavily on GCIs at the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's fine.
They were very worried about the B-58 Hustler.
Oh, the Hustler, right. Big supersonic nuclear bomber. So this was here to come and try and take that down. Find it and take it down, I guess. As well as... okay. Anything interesting? Carry on.
An interesting piece of history. This Su-15 actually shot down 2 civilian Boeing aircraft.
Interesting. Of what nation?
I do not know. A Korean Airlines flight.
Yeah, I remember.
07 in 1983. And what's interesting is they actually had named this the Boeing killer because they were going after these bombers. So it ended up killing Boeing civilian airliners.
Is this political or was it genuinely accidental? I don't really know the history of it.
Western aviation experts believed it's accidental.
Really? So how is it accidental? Am I missing the obvious?
Korean airliner was, I believe, it strayed over Siberia.
Yeah, but you don't shoot a Boeing down because of that. Surely they would have got.
I mean, it's restricted airspace.
I mean, I wouldn't put it past the commies to shoot down civilian aircraft.
Surely
it wasn't so much that as that there were so many interceptor flights with this aircraft. They were constantly being used to intercept unknown contacts, and they were just flying a lot.
Sure.
So it was just a matter of time until somebody made a mistake.
It depends if it was BVR or within visual range as well, because at the time, I highly doubt they had the radar fidelity to really kind of tell what it was.
Agreed. It was a dot in the sky according to the radar, wasn't it? It was just a thing.
I mean, let's be honest. Even the U.S. shot down a civilian.
I mean, if you've got
airliner and they had the entire carrier group.
If you've got a spot on your radar scope just inside your airspace that's not responding to calls, doesn't have a transponder or any form of IFF board, or it's not working, you're not picking it up, in that kind of political environment, you're going to shoot it, right?
Right, I guess. And I guess this was at the height of the Cold War. So this is I don't know when it was, but I'm guessing it was 60s. When literally everyone thought the neighbor was going to come over and drop nukes on them. So I guess there is credence. I guess there is some sort of excuse. And also, like we were saying, radar at this point couldn't determine what type of aircraft really you were shooting at. It was just a blip. So yeah.
Actually,
I mean, even if
1983.
Even in 1983, you got to remember, if it was over Siberia, all of the nice, tasty, brand new S-300 radar sites, they're all around Moscow, they're all around the border of Poland. What do you have you have an S2 system up in the middle of Siberia, right? Because you're not.
And some of these fighters that are 20, 30 years old by then.
Exactly.
You should still send somebody to go and take a look.
1,290 of these were built between 1965 and
yeah, I'd agree with Auntie. You've got your Mach 2 fighter. Bomb over there and check it out. I mean, it's so hard to say. Was it nearing a city, maybe? Did they have to make that snapshot? Don't know. So, anyway, we're getting a bit off topic, guys.
They were probably on the edge because of the nukes.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, it was near Minoran Island. It veered into the Soviet airspace.
All right, let's crack on. It was good, but yeah. Right, now here's an interesting thing. In this picture, which I found on the internet and bodged together basically, we've got nothing between Su-15 and Su-27. Now I know there are, there were planes between that. So let's just delve into it a little bit. Does anyone know before we get to the Su-22? Was there anything important before the Su-22 in history?
This the page I've got open at the moment. It's got the Su-17, the Su-20, and the Su-22. All as pretty much the same aircraft, they're just different export designations.
Okay, so the Su-22. Can you link that page to me? Right. So before we go and look at the 17, 20, 22, Auntie's going to regale us with the story. Go ahead.
Yeah, it got the name Boeing Killux on April the 20th, 1978. Korean Airlines 707 en route from Paris to Seoul entered Soviet airspace near Murmansk. It was intercepted by an Su-15. The Soviets claimed the plane was on a spy mission and ignored commands to land. The South Koreans claimed it was an accidental overflight and the Soviets were trigger happy. Regardless, the S-15 fired 2 R-60 missiles, one of which hit the plane, and the pilot still managed to land the 707 on a frozen lake, and only 2 people were killed.
Wow, that is an interesting piece of history then. So the main thing I learnt there was that it was in visual range. They could see it was a 707 with windows down the side. But let's go back to fairness. How did they know it had passengers? How did they know it wasn't just a converted spy plane? If it wasn't responding, yeah, they kind of got a point, haven't they?
Yeah, but they did it again in September of 1983 when another Korean airline flew from Seoul to Tokyo and again entered Soviet airspace over Sakhalin Island near Japan.
Mm-hmm.
The 747 was intercepted by an Su-15S which fired warning shots. The shells were invisible in the darkness to the Korean pilots because the interceptor's cannons lacked tracer rounds. And before the 747 left Soviet airspace, they were ordered to shoot it down. And it got hit by 2 missiles. The airliner crashed, killing all 269 passengers and crew.
What's the matter with these bloody Russians?
This is a 747.
Yeah.
They're Russian.
Including a hawkish US congressman who was president of the John Birch Society. Whatever that is.
I'm surprised that didn't start a war.
So it was, right, so it was in visual range, but at night, but 747 is a 747. There's no mistaking what it is, even at night. Oh, I don't know. It's so hard to say, isn't it? What could that fitter pilot see? Could he, or whatever it is, fish pot or something? What could he actually
You could
see?
probably see the windows lighting up.
Could he? Yeah, maybe. It's tough, isn't it? And who makes the order to
Lights are
fire?
very far apart on that aircraft.
If it was in British airspace, one of the jets would have flown right up in front so the pilots could see the aircraft in front of it, the lights and everything, to make sure that they were aware it was there. They wouldn't just fire warning shots with no tracer around.
Yeah, that was...
Yeah, static. That's in the U.S. as well. So we can honestly say in civilized airspace, the aircraft would fly within the visual of the pilot.
Yeah. Okay.
Another incident happened when an Su-15 collided in 1968 with a MiG-15 flown by Yuri Gagarin. The collision killed the first human being to fly into outer space.
Oh, I remember Gagarin. Yep. So, formation accidents. Luckily, we get to respawn, but they don't get to respawn. All right. So it sounds like I had a bit of a checkered history. This Su-15 guys, it shot the world down by the sounds of it, and killed first cosmonaut, astronaut, whatever you call them. Okay, right, we're going to crack on, guys. So we jumped over to this, to Wikipedia, whatever you call it here. We've got a Sukhoi Su-17. It appears to be similar to the 20 and the 22. They're bolt together in Wikipedia. This is... Oh, is it a fitter? It's a fitter, okay. Now, this is a belting-looking aircraft, I can tell you that, because we've got one coming to Riot. In fact, this is where we're doing the public meeting at Riot in 7 days' time. Or 6 days' time, 8 days' time, whatever it is, at Riot... RAF someone? Fairford in the UK. And it's a swept wing, but it's also variable wing, I think. So it sweeps back, if you know what I'm saying.
It is.
It's very old school Sukhoi design. It's got that aggressive nose cone, which I don't know why, because I thought it would have a big radar. First of all, guys, I'm not going to read through this, so you guys do my work. Let's talk about... oh, no, I can do it. Look, I can do some work. First flight was in 1966. introduction in 1970. It says in limited service, but I know that it was very widely used. Does anyone have any interesting information about how widely it was used?
Is that the one that's just got like
German
half
secret.
swing wings?
Yeah, it's one of the half swing ones.
Well, a total of 2,867 Su-17s and its variants were built, of which 1,165 were exported to 15 nations.
I mean, this is massive. This is more than F-16, you know, which we consider a really high, you know, successful aircraft. It shows how successful these really were. These I don't know, the 60s and 70s, well, and onwards, Russian fighters, hugely successful.
Yeah,
Cap,
like,
go ahead.
yeah. So like the F-16, there's like 1,000 and some like 100 in the US currently. So just to put it in perspective.
Absolutely. Okay.
So yeah, Cap, the limited service on it is talking about right now because currently Angola, Libya, Poland, Syria, and Vietnam still fly them.
Absolutely. And remember, that's a 1970 aircraft, and that's flying 48 years later. So it's, you know, F-15 type history in terms of its service. So it shows it was good. It does its job. It works. It's maintainable. It's blah 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 blah. Okay, produced up to 1990. Can someone get me? Let's do our usual stuff. Let's talk about the engine. Someone get me that info.
One Lyuka AL-21 afterburning turbojet.
At
Afterburner, 24,675 pounds of thrust.
yeah, so it's a relatively decent engine. It's a variable swept wing, halfway down the wing roughly. So that second half, if you like, the second half of the wing would swing back. So I'm guessing it's going to have some nice speed. What have we got top speed on this bird?
At sea level, Mach 1.13. At altitude, Mach 1.51.
So it's not actually that fast. So what was good about this?
It's got quite a hefty combat range of just over 1,000 kilometers. That's 620 nautical miles.
Okay, and it was a fighter bomber, I'm guessing.
It had a ferry range of 2,300 kilometers.
So that's if you stick bags on it, I'm guessing.
It's got 12 hard points with a capacity up to 4,000 kilograms. That's 8.8 thousand pounds.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's a fair amount of resource.
Okay, cool.
And it's got anti-radiation missile capability, which is something the MiG-21 never had. Which is, I compared this to the MiG-21 because they're quite similar.
Yeah, I mean, this is a lot later than the MiG-21. This is 1970 aircraft. MiG-21 is 50s. Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I'm more thinking the Biz variant.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
It can also drop laser-guided electrical optical napalm, drag chute, and cluster bombs.
Yeah.
yeah, but it doesn't drop nukes.
Finally.
For once, one that doesn't drop nukes.
Oh my god, beautiful. Right, this is my favourite. Right, I like this plane. I know it's not very fast. But look at the size of the wing fences on it. Jesus Christ. Unbelievably big wing. It must have a hugely swept wing.
If you scroll down towards the specifications part, you'll actually see a really nice diagram of how the wings vary.
Can't. Specifications,
One
yeah.
sec.
Like that black and white drawing.
Yeah,
Yeah. So you could have a huge swept wing for going fast, even though it didn't actually go that fast. And I guess it was heavy and it just wasn't that powerful. And this for low speed. Cool. Missiles. So it had a No, it didn't have a radar. Yes, it did. A K1, a K13. No, it didn't have any radiation miss. I'm not lying, am I? This thing didn't have a radar. I can't see any air-to-air radar-guided missiles in that list.
No, okay. Well, I don't know what the K13 is, but the R60 and R73 are both heaters.
They're all heaters.
They're all heated. Right, so here's an interesting piece of history. We think we got this right. Now, we noticed at the beginning it had the MiG-21 style nose cone. It means it's not going to have a big search and acquisition radar like an F-15, an F-14, an F-4 or something like that. And it appears to be right, because it appears to only fire Fox 2s, as far as I can see, and obviously a bunch of SEAD and air-to-ground missiles. So that's an interesting thing, but it is still technically a fighter as well.
It had a ranging radar like the Sabre, I believe.
Yeah.
It was based on the Su-7, so it's very old design.
So it is a very small. So I'm guessing that made it cheap to make. Maybe one of the reasons why it was so widely used. I'm guessing it's, you put a big radar in a plane, it makes it exponentially more expensive because all that support gear and the radar itself and all the support gear for the radar and the design changes, blah 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 blah. So this could be made without the big radar, just to fly, just to drop bombs, just to shoot sidewinders, or the equivalent of sidewinders. Okay, very good. Right, we should move on, guys. Anything interesting before we sign off on this? Right, so that is the fitter. So we now are going to move to the flankers. What can I say? It's a whopping great thunder chunky of a modern fighter. So I think I'm right in saying that the Russians kicked off first with the MiG-25 Foxbat. The Americans fought back with that and got the F-15. I know they had a Tomcat as well, but mainly for the F-15. In the early 70s, and then the Russians kicked back against the F-15 with the two design bureaus had the MiG-29 and the Sukhois had the Flanker, starting with the Su-27 variant. So can someone get me information about the timeline of this, please?
Its first flight was in 77 and it was introduced in 85.
So it's a good few years behind the F-15. But you could say it was a lot more advanced in some ways. So same idea, average swept wing in the middle. Well, actually no, because the F-15 was relatively stable platform, wasn't it? But the Flanker was purposefully unstable, relying on its fly-by-wire type controls. I think I'm right in saying that, aren't I?
Yeah, the F-15 was a stable aircraft.
And hence we had a lot more manoeuvrability in the Flanker, and we can prove that. We can go in DTS, we can turn a lot tighter, we can turn not necessarily faster, but in a dogfight you're always going to want to pick the Flanker if you're going to be in a close dogfight. In other interesting things, before I hand it over to the guys, interesting things that I know about is that it had the addition, along with the MiG-29, of a hard point infrared sensor. So as well as having just an infrared sensor on your missiles, you had it actually built into the plane, or like a built-in radar. Hugely effective, I don't know how effective it was in the real world, but in our simulations in DCS world, hugely effective. I can lock up silently, because I don't need to use my radar, I can use my passive infrared system. I can lock up an F-15 20 miles away and fire a 20-mile infrared guided missile at it. Wonderful piece of kit, assuming that it worked in the real world. Other than that, unstable plane, big engines, Saturns, I think they were 25,000 pounds, Mach 2.2 fighter at high altitude, so very, very good. I'm going to hand it over to the guys. What other interesting stuff have you got to add?
The US has 4 of them.
One thing I think is worth pointing out is just how, I don't know how it stacks up against modern fighters, but just how advanced the fly-by-wire in that thing was.
Not very. It was pitch only. So that's just up and down, and hence you can press that switch in the simulator and it turns the fly-by-wire off, because that's all it had. You had no roll fly-by-wire, you had no yaw fly-by-wire. I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying that was all just stick and rudder, so you just had up and down.
But the ability that combined with the way the wing is formed, the ability to perform the Cobra. I was watching an interesting video the other day saying that essentially any aircraft can perform a Cobra.
Yeah, it can.
All it is you're pulling the nose up and pushing the ass down. But the Su-27 was pretty much the first and one of the only aircraft in the world, even to this day, that are capable of actually maintaining stability throughout. Even though it's an inherently unstable aircraft, it's actually able to maintain stability throughout that maneuver.
Note that to do that maneuver, and it's a cool thing, it's impressive to see, you do actually have to turn your fly-by-wire system off and revert to manual control.
I thought the MiG-29 was the one that performed it first at air displays.
Agreed.
No, I believe it was the Su-27, because I don't think Pugachev flew the MiG-29.
Oh, I think Auntie was right in saying in the West. It was
in the West.
In the West, yeah, I think that's what we mean there. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the Cobra maneuver is just where you basically pull the stick up, and because of the kind of inherent instability of the plane, it kind of, its ass just goes almost forward. Everyone knows what a Cobra is. Forwards in front of its nose, which is kind of flipped up, but it can retain control, and the natural design of the plane means that the drag of the wings, which is so far back, the nose will eventually right itself, and it's just a way of losing speed quickly. That's all a Cobra is. It can go from 400 knots.
Somebody yesterday posted a video of a Saab Draken doing it.
The main point I'm trying to make is if you try that in 99% of aircraft, all that'll happen is you'll stall one of the wings out because the airflow will. You'll essentially end up with more airflow going over one wing than the other.
My understanding is the reason that it can do it is because its wings are so far back, which is one of the reasons why it's so horrendously unstable, is that they act as a brake, and that's what forces the nose backward forwards, hence it gives it that stability when it's stalled. Now let's go to a F4 Phantom. The wings are a lot closer to the front. It won't have that effect, so if you do a Cobra in a Phantom, there's nothing to right the nose, there's nothing to pull the nose forward. It's just literally going to stop in the sky and fall backwards. That's my very layman understanding of why that works.
All right, so in the MiG-27, its wings are actually a cross between a swept wing and a cropped delta.
Yeah.
And its tail is also an example of a tail delta.
Roger. Now I know that in the early versions, we're talking prototype versions, they had the tails really close together, like the Tomcat, on top of the engine nacelles. Now I forgot what problem this had, but it did lead to huge instabilities and loss of bird, so they had to move them right out wide, which is what gives it that really wide look. And of course, what we haven't mentioned is it's technically correct, but it's probably the most prolific lifting body aircraft along with the MiG-29. So when we say that, we mean it's designed so that the body, the traditional, what we'd call the fuselage, I mean this doesn't have a fuselage, this aircraft, but what's known as the body or the fuselage of the aircraft acts as a wing itself, giving it huge amounts of lift. And one of the reasons it can have such a high turning circle, because with the body being a wing, it's reducing your reducing your overall wing loading, compared to something like an F4 Phantom, which has almost no body lift. So that's an interesting design feature. And this was all designed, it wasn't just by accident, obviously. So the actual body of it was essentially a wing, and you essentially bolted the engine nacelles onto that wing. And this was a thing in Tomcats and stuff like that back in the 60s, but this is probably the most prolific use of that. Weapons, huge modern suite of weapons, obviously. As far as I know, the Su-27 didn't have the equivalent Fox 3. We had to go to moderner versions, like the Su-30 and the 35 and stuff like that. For that, I stand to be corrected.
Wasn't this the introduction of the helmet-mounted sight?
Oh, there's another one, along with the MiG-29. Yep, another reason why the Soviets were ahead in many ways was that they had the helmet-mounted sight. So wherever you point your head is where your IR tracker goes. And it's a brilliant system. It's an amazing system.
Does the 27 have helmet-mounted sights?
Yes, it does. It does. Yep. So when we talk about the 27, this is essentially the first generation of flankers. Flankers went throughout the years, and they're still a new thing now, basically, but they've been modernised. And they had nothing. The Americans had nothing to come back at that really until literally
this
now.
Aircraft scared the Americans. It was the first one we saw that we were like, oh, okay, we need to do something.
Yeah.
Another thing that's worth mentioning as well is its huge fuel capacity. It's got a range and altitude of just under 2,000 nautical miles. That's kind of insane. And
that's one of the reasons why it was so massive. It's an absolutely enormous plane. Even if you can see it in here, I know it looks kind of skinny, but it is massive and it is heavy, much heavier than an F-15. It had many advantages over an F-15. It could go further. It couldn't go as fast, but speed doesn't really matter in the real world. These speed differences. The MiG-29, they weren't afraid of that as much because it was a pop-up fighter. It didn't have not much range at all. The Sukhoi could stay in the air for a long, long time, and I believe it could just on its internal fuel, but I think it could carry bags as well on some versions. So,
What's also worth noting is with all that fuel, with full fuel, it still had a thrust weight of 0.91.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so as far as I'm aware, the 27 version never had the thrust weight of the F-15 Eagle, but it was always pretty close. Now, and one interesting thing is I've always noticed is the difference in doctrines between the F-15. The F-15 was designed to essentially go really fast, right? I know it can turn as well. It's not the best turner in the world, but it goes really fast. And the doctrine of the Su-27 is it's more bird-like in shape. It's got a lot more wing all over itself. And and therefore a better wing loading, which means it could turn better. It's a better turn fighter at the end of the day. But adding more wing adds more drag, and hence it would doesn't accelerate as fast as the F-15 Eagle, even though it's got more powerful engines of the time. And it can never go as fast. It can have that top speed. It is a lot more draggy. Its drag coefficient is higher. So you've got a difference in doctrine then. That one goes faster. That one is draggier, but turns better. So
I mean, on the doctrine note, from one thing, I mean, it's just a personal observation, but it feels to me like Russia and the Soviet Union, they've always kind of had a lot more variety in their airframes, right? So the F-15 is both a fighter, it's also an interceptor, it's also with the F-15 Strike Eagle a ground attack multi-role variant, whereas the Russians, they have the Su-27 for overall air superiority. It's an aircraft that can sit in the air for 2 hours saying, this is my patch of airspace, don't come here. And then they've got the MiG-29 that can react as a close-range reaction fighter, and then they've got things like the MiG-21 that can intercept. Mm-hmm. They've got they I don't know, they seem to specialize a lot more in their airframes.
Yeah, and also there's like 10 versions of the flanker.
Yeah, there's a vast amount of versions. One thing that doesn't help is they export a lot, and a lot of the versions are for the export. They will have an export version for India, an export version for China, and so on. Makes things awfully confusing. Right, anything on the 27 version before we move on?
There's been a fair few accidents, from what I can see.
Oh, really? Well, yeah, they're one of the biggest airshow killers of humans, basically. I think they are the biggest airshow killer of humans. Probably more pilot than aeroplane, ? But
yeah, the biggest, the most tragic airshow disaster was an Su-27. Actually, it might have been the 30 since it was a twin seat going down because of a pilot error.
Yeah, I remember.
Pilots ejected, but the aircraft fell onto the crowd.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it could have been any plane that had done that. A Hawk could have gone on down and killed those people, but it was the flanker.
Yeah.
I think it's pilot error. I think it's people showing off as soon as they're in the flanker.
Yeah, I think it was that too, because like you said, any aircraft can do that, because the most tragic one before that was the Ramstein airshow crash, where the Tricolore display team, they basically messed up in the Pierced Heart formation.
I mean, there's a few quite interesting accidents listed here. For example, 2 Su-27s and Su-27UB, the Russian flight demonstration team, crashed into terrain. Essentially what they were doing was they were holding formation on the IL-76, and due to the landing approach the 76 was taking, it passed too close to the terrain. Okay. So what happened was the 76 obviously just kind of skimmed across the terrain, but the 3 right echelon Su-27s hit the terrain.
Fucking stupid lead. It's so important for the lead plane, even if it's a tanker, to be doing that right, and thinking about that. But
indeed.
Okay, guys, let's move on. Right, so we're going to blast through the variations. So on Su-30, as far as I'm aware, it was only export. It may have also been internal. I don't really know. I know they were all twin-seater. I think that was more about, because it's going to the countries wanted it twin-seater than for a specific reason for the actual aircraft. I think they wanted a separate pilot and a separate radar operator or ground bomber or whatever that was. But otherwise, the Su-30 was pretty much the same. Now, there are sub-variants. So you got an Su-30 which is a sub-variant, which might have effective thrusts and stuff like that. That is a thing later on. So the variants are very confusing. In Western countries, they're very simple. An F-15A, a F-15B, a C, an E, and that's it. There's no sub-variants or nothing of any substance. These, I find them incredibly confusing. So that's a thing, an Su-30. The next is an Su-33. It does vary quite a bit from the Su-27. Obviously, it's based on it. It is designed for landing on carriers and being, if you like, an equivalent of an F-14. A naval fleet defence, I guess you call it. Differences were it was 2 tons heavier at the front or near that due to landing gear. Landing gear is extremely heavy. An aircraft is light. It's made of aluminium, almost foil. It's really, really lightweight. design. Landing gear on aircraft are incredibly, unbelievably resilient, but also very heavy. So you add 2 tons to that front of that, and they added 4 planes, winglets at the front. There's a lot of conspiracy out there saying that it was there to add maneuverability. In fact, 4 planes added no maneuverability at all. On the official Flanker book that I read, they said they had more maneuverability in the elevons than they could ever actually use. Fly-by-wire would never use more than about 30% of those rear elevons. Adding 4 planes would not actually help at all. It was there purely to give you more lift when landing on a carrier with an extra 2 tons at the front. Rear landing gear more heavy, and or it might be the overall was 2 tons heavier, something along those lines. I think it was the overall that was 2 tons heavier because of the extra landing gear. They also had to add extra ribs, and they had to in the middle, and they had to add linkages and the gear hook at the back. It was just as fast, Mach 2.2. In reality, I think it would probably be a bit slower because you have to fly at a higher angle of attack. Otherwise, pretty much the same jet, an extra pylon, 2 pylons. Anything to add to the Su-33, guys?
An interesting thing about the 33 that I find is its biggest weakness is actually the carrier it's operating from. Out of the 3 notable accidents, 2 of them were arrestor cable failures on the Kuznetsov.
Kuznetsov. And the Russians, as far as I'm aware, only ever had 1 modern aircraft carrier, the Kuznetsov. Anyone disagree?
Yeah, I believe they only have 1 carrier.
It's pretty limited compared. I mean, let's face it. Around this time, they were bankrupt, so they were owning a shoestring Kuznetsov, whereas the rich and prosperous capitalist West, United States, was running God knows how many carriers, 6, 7 nuclear
USS
carriers.
Nimitz class.
Fun fact, the Kuznetsov is not an aircraft carrier. The Kuznetsov is an aircraft carrying cruiser. If it was designated an aircraft carrier, it would not legally be allowed to pass the I can't remember what it's called, the Dardanelles, whatever that area.
So that's how they got around it then, was it? Right.
Yes.
Right, interesting. Okay, cool. Next, I mean, there are other variants, but notably Su-35. As far as I'm aware, it's essentially the modernised Su-27 for interior use with Russia and export, I believe. Now, you had versions with vector thrust, versions without vector thrust. Generally, you had improved engines, improved avionics, improved everything. But any facts and figures about the Su-35 that's notable, guys?
When they one thing I find notable, at least being in Brazil, is when they tried to export it to Brazil for Brazil's FX tender program, it was beaten out twice. The first time by the Mirage 2000, and now the second time it was beaten out by the Gripen, which also beat out the Super Hornet, the F-16, the Dassault Rafale, and the Eurofighter Typhoon.
It really is a giant killer, this little thing down here. And when it comes to export, money matters on an export. An Su-35 is not the most expensive thing in the world, but it's expensive, it's high maintenance. A little Gripen is just a really complete package that can do 90% of what that plane there does, but it also is dirt cheap and easy to maintain. You get full rights with it and stuff like that. I can understand, I
don't want people to get the wrong idea that the Su-35 was this next aircraft that scared the United States.
Yeah.
The variable thrust was, I believe, 360 degrees. I mean, it had a full range. It wasn't just up and down or left and right. It was all the way.
Kind of. There's a little bit of misconception. They call it Ovigal. So to make a full range would have been impossible. It would have been so complicated.
I don't mean backwards, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, but no, it's a good thing to clear up. So there's an idea that... So there's vector thrust, right? It's the idea you can vector your thrust, basically. And it helps you add extra torque in your turn or your pitch. Okay, they experimented on it and they found the best that the Americans decided the best thing to do is keep it as simple as possible. Just add it to your pitch so it goes up and down, and you got that in the F-22 Raptor. And it's a good thing. It helps that Raptor turn at slow speeds, and that's an important thing. You've got to be able to turn at slow speeds. You can turn it in a stall basically. So it's useful at slow speed if you get yourself in slow speed. Russians went a different way. They didn't want just pitch. They wanted pitch and yaw as well, and in a way roll as well. So they call it 360. Now, interestingly, that nozzle doesn't actually move 360. To do that, you would have had to add tens of actuators. It would have been incredibly expensive and almost impossible to engineer and add weight, blah, 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 blah. When you build a fighter, you've got to build it as simple as possible. So it actually only moves in one dimension, actually the same as the F-22. But that dimension is actually 45 degrees. So instead of going up and down, it goes up and left 45 degrees and down and right at 45 degrees, just in that one dimension. Now, the interesting thing about adding that, and then the right engine does the same, but in the opposite. So you can create a V. Now, by being able to do them separately, you can add literally almost a 360 degree. I know it's 3 to 6 degrees. It's not correct at all, but you can add different variations. So you can make the thing go up in pitch, down in pitch. You can add your left, your right. You would have to add roll as well. So you'll never be able to see this plane. You'll just use your. It will add roll as well. But just with the same amount of technology, and this is why it's superior to the F-22, the same, just 2 actuators is all it uses again. You can add all that extra amount of maneuverability, vectorability, if you like. It's driven by fuel pressure. Again, the last thing you want to do is add in extra systems. Why would you want an extra system of a hydraulic fuel, a hydraulic oil? No, use the fuel. Siphon it off from the fuel tank. Use that, and that is the thing to do. As well, it uses the fuel for the coolant in the aircraft. It's a very well designed aircraft. So that's what we call OVIGO vector thrust. If anyone wants to add anything to that, it wasn't in all of the Su-35s. I believe it was added to some. And it's a thing. Some people call it a fad, the vector thrust. Some people call it useful. I mean, if you get stuck, like we're doing a thing at the moment where we fight warbirds, if you get stuck fighting a warbird and you're stuck down at 150 knots, I would want it then. But that's the only time I would want it.
I believe it also helps with high angle attacks at speed.
High angle attacks at speed. But you wouldn't have a high angle attack at speed. Why would you have a high? You don't want high angle.
If you need to nose up a missile or something.
Just snap turns, essentially.
But you don't want to do that at speed. If you do that at speed, you'll rip your wings off.
One thing to mention about this, though, is unlike the other variants, it is very much Fox 3 capable with 12 R-77s able to be carried on the wings.
Yeah, so it has
on the aircraft.
The equivalent of the AMRAAM, the R-77. So it's more modernised all the way through, basically. So it's stepping up 10 years, 20 years, whatever it was. It must have been early 90s or something, Su-35, something like that. But anyway, okay, let's carry on, guys. Then Su-37 Super Flanker is the next in the variation, basically. It's a bit different, it's a bit bigger, as you can see. I think they might have all come with OVIGO vector thrust. I'm not sure. I'm only clarifying. More powerful engines, £30,000 plus or something like that. The next step up, £32,000. Anyone know? And you're going to have your better radar, your better avionics. Anything otherwise markedly different in the 37 Super Flanker?
The 37 was a prototype, and only one was made, and that one crashed.
I thought it was a thing.
No. You're talking about the Su-47. It was designated.
Su-37.
No, S-37.
Yeah, right. I thought that sounded a bit weird.
There's the 2 different variants. The Su-37 is the new Super Flanker. The S-37 turned into the Su-47. My very favourite aircraft, and yes, there's only one built.
Just on the 36.
On the page itself, it says not to be confused with the S-37 Bearcat. Su-47.
But let's stick with the Su-37 Super Flanker. Is this a thing, or is it just a project? I'm confused now. So do we know if it was built and made and exported?
Su-37 did not enter production despite a report in 1988 which claimed that the Sukhoi had built a second Su-37 using the 12th Su-27.
Number built 1. Conversion from Su-27M. It says it on Wikipedia.
Right. Okay.
Wikipedia is hardly God's word, but
that's good enough.
Yeah,
for us.
but
it's good enough for us.
It's God's word for the Grim Reapers.
Yeah. Okay. That answers our question enough. Yeah, you were right. There was only one then. I thought it was developed, but it sounds like it more or less stopped at the Su-35. So the Su-37 was a Super Flanker. They tried it and they didn't build anymore. Probably bankrupt. Don't know. Fair enough. Okay. That's annoying because I thought that was a thing. Never mind. Let's move on, guys. The Su-47. Now this I know was not a thing. I know it was a prototype, but who wants to talk about that? It had wings going backwards instead of forwards, didn't it?
Yeah, swept forward wings, similar to the American Grumman X-29, I think, run by NASA. It's just a technology demonstrator, but it was designed to test all the new carbon fibers and stuff like that went into the 27 and the new. What's now the Su-57, the PAC-50.
Yeah.
One built, forward swept wings, looks the business.
Would love to have one in DCS.
Yeah, they called it the Golden Eagle, the Berkut, the Golden Eagle, but NATO reporting name was Firkin.
Right.
And when you saw it, it was like Firkin, hell.
No,
but that was spelled Firkin. So, but yeah.
It was a big.
Yeah, that's fun.
At the time, they thought that this aircraft was going to be the one to combat America's 22 Raptor.
Oh yeah, they thought it was going to go into production. I mean, it first flew September '97, but it was just to test all the new technologies. But it did have the new variable thrust engines that you were talking about. It could vector its thrust at 20 degrees in pitch and yaw, and at 30 degrees a second. So it takes less than 1 second to get to 20 degrees in pitch and yaw. So if you were to pitch it up and yaw it across, you could make it twist round in a 360-degree circle just by using 2 actuators.
Okay, and it's massive, obviously. Anything?
Slow.
It also triggers the hell out of me because that tail has 2 unequally sized booms on it.
All planes do. All at the
Mother,
top.
they actually do.
It's
Jesus.
not symmetrical, as in most aircraft are, if you draw a line down the centre of an aircraft, most of them will be symmetrical. If you look at the tail on that aircraft there, one is longer than the right-hand side, one is longer than
I see
the left.
that. Okay, right. Anything else interesting about this, the Berkut?
It only went Mach 1.65.
It was limited to Mach 1.
Yeah, I mean,
No, it's what it achieved in the test flights.
I mean, they probably just had no intention of driving it faster, I imagine, because it wasn't what they're interested in. Yeah, cool. All right, guys. So that's a little bit of history for you. And PACFAR, the Su-50 question mark, is that what it's called?
57, if I'm not
It's
mistaken.
Su-57, so that's the next model variant. It's obviously the equivalent to the F-22 Raptor. We haven't got a picture of it here, but it's what we call a 5th gen, so it's based around a stealth platform. Similar type of nose to the Fu-22, similar type of doctrine in the wings and the tail layout to make it stealthy. Probably has I imagine it has Ovigo vector thrust. Probably has weapons bay. Anyone got any more concrete information on it? I don't know a lot about it.
The radar for it can look sideways, I believe, at a 90-degree angle.
Ah, that's cool. So could the Su-35, but yeah, that's cool. I mean, that's a sexy looking plane, right? That's pretty cool.
It looks like
She
a
is
mix
pretty.
between the YF and the F-22.
And look how they've been typically Russian and taken the idea of body lift to the extreme. The wings are like tiny little F-16 wings stuck on. The body is where all the lift is at, isn't it? You can just tell.
Yeah, that's a sexy aircraft right there.
Yeah, and the engines is 39,566 pounds of thrust each.
Hugely powerful. That's the most powerful fighter engine in the world, as far as I'm aware. Now, here's an interesting thing. Look at the centre of lift. So if you want to see how unstable a fighter is, look at the centre of lift. And the centre of lift has been moving... Well, this isn't technically true, but just stick with me. The centre of lift has been moving generally back as avionics have improved and fly-by-wires improved. So we look at the first really unstable fighters like the Flanker. The centre of lift is kind of where my mouse is here. They've put the wings right back. Look at the centre of lift here, roughly. Kind of where these wings at the widest point is about 80% back. So just think how unstable that thing is to fly. Sorry, not to fly, but without avionics, how unstable that thing would be in the air. Notice the direction of the engines there. So the intakes will be roughly here where my mouse cursor is, and they'll funnel in, step that way, then step that way. That is to stop radar beams from hostiles bouncing in that engine, hitting the compressor blade and bouncing out. That's the biggest killer of stealth, is radar beams or radar signals heading into an engine inlet, bouncing off the compressor blades, which is impossible to make them stealthy, and then bouncing back. So that was how they did that. Has it got a weapons bay, chaps? I'm guessing it has. It'd be weird if it didn't.
Yes, it has 6 internal and 6 external hardpoints.
Yeah, right.
I've
Gotcha.
just posted a second video in media there. If you look at it from the 3-minute mark, you'll see how they can just throw this around the sky as if it was in a flat spin vertically and
Stand by.
pull it straight out to the side. It's amazing.
Заваливает сейчас атакующий самолет в
Oh, the resolution.
I've stuck another image in there that really shows that you're talking about the whole aircraft being a wing, moving on the side view. And you can see again, there's just no large. It's just a wing with a cockpit on the front.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. There's no fuselage there.
I mean, I'll continue firmly believing that until it's combat proven, the F-22 will hand it its ass on a silver platter.
But the good thing is you can fly this in DCS.
Yeah, you
there's a
can.
lot for it.
I'm not convinced about its legitimate handling, I can tell you that. Anyway, we've got to crack on, guys, because we do have a job to do, so let's finish off. Sorry, carry on.
One interesting fact about it is that it was planned for India to have a development of it, but India stepped back from it and canceled that program.
Roger. Right, let me check the time. Oh my god, it's nearly 6 o'clock. Armour today, isn't it? Right, okay, we can work with this. Right, okay, that's completes the Sukhoi. Next, Supermarine, British company. Started off, I think, making flying boats, and then moved, I think they're flying boats and racing planes. I think they built the Silver Spirit or whatever I can't remember the name now. And then they had because of their fast planes, they had in the late 30s the contract to build the Spitfire. So the Spitfire's not here, but it's a thing. Everyone knows what the Spitfire is, contemporary to the Mustang BF-109 and whatnot. All aluminium, extremely good fighter. It's not here, so we're not going to cover it too much. But let's cover what is here. Supermarine. I can't read that. FB2 question mark.
FB1
Supermarine Attacker FB2.
Attacker. Anyone got a Supermarine
FB2.
Attacker? What is that? Is it a thing?
It's a single-seat naval jet fighter built by Supermarine for the Royal Navy's Fleet Air Arm.
What date?
It first flew
1951.
51. So before missiles. So it's guns only. And it's naval. Right. So we've got speed on that thing.
It has the distinction of being the first jet fighter to enter operational services with the Fleet Air Arm.
Right. It's the first naval
And
fighter.
probably the smallest.
It is pretty tiny. It really is tiny, isn't it? Okay. What motor have we got in it?
one single Rolls-Royce Nene turbojet.
Oh, so that's the Nene. So that was what was given away to the Russians for the MiG-15. Okay. Well, that would explain the fatness of the body. Got that whopping great centrifugal compressor in there. Okay, I mean, the Nene was actually pretty powerful. But did it have any speed in it, or was that straight wing?
The maximum speed is about 513 knots.
It's pretty cool, right? That's, yeah, it's all right. Okay.
It's not half bad for a naval fighter. I'd say.
I bet that had your problems. Look at the size of that tiny tail. I bet that was shifted around when you were getting fast. Right, so guns only, obviously no missiles at that point really in history that were working properly, so fair enough.
It has the best guns in the world though, 4 Hispano 20mm.
Yeah, we do like the Hispanos, don't we? Right, from little to large then. Scimitar, question mark, is that what it says?
Scimitar, yeah.
Scimitar, right.
Scimitar.
What have we got on this, chaps? When was this in history?
Introduced in 57, retired in 69.
Another Fleet Air Arm aircraft.
Roger. I don't recognise it at all. Is that twin engine? Must be. And what engines were they?
It is. 2 Rolls-Royce Avon 202 turbojets.
Avon, so it's the same ones as was in the Lightning, although they were afterburning, and the same as in the Vulcan. Was it afterburning? And what speed have we got on this baby?
Doesn't look like it was afterburning, and it could reach 640 kilometers.
670 knots.
736 miles per hour at sea level.
Okay, so we're transonic. We're transonic, so that must have had a sweep in the wing then. And possibly an all-moving tailplane. Okay, now...
No, it didn't.
Oh, didn't it?
No, it was, it's got a bit of a sweep. If you look at some of the pictures, you can see the sweep.
Okay, alright.
Also, it looks to have forward slats, which is quite interesting.
Now we're in missile territory here, so were we firing British missiles, IR missiles at this point?
We were firing up to 4 AGM-12 bullpups or AIM-9 Sidewinders.
So the early version Sidewinders. Okay, cool.
And it did carry a Redbeard freefall nuclear bomb.
Of course it did. Of course it did. Anything else on the Scimitar?
4 30mm 8-inch cannons.
4 30mm cannons. Wow, you really want to kill something with 4 30mm cannons, don't you? They love their 4 mates.
Same as in the Harrier and the Jaguar and the Tornado and everything else we've built.
Roger. And it's a fairly big old bird as well. I mean, it's bigger than a Viggen, as you can see. So, yeah. All right.
Remember, this aircraft is having a lot of problems with flight.
Oh, really? Explain.
Pitch problems, just general handling problems. I remember not being too popular among pilots.
The aircraft evolved more with the third Type 544 incorporating changes to try and fix the aerodynamic effects. Basically, it was trying to pitch up effect. Every time you brought it to high speed, obviously your nose will always rise, but apparently this was doing quite a hefty rise under acceleration nose rise.
Sounds like a Black Widow. Not Black Widow,
Yeah,
like
it would put you
Widowmaker.
into a flat spin and you die. That's the
Nice.
basic.
Yeah, the aircraft did kill Commander John Russell, was the commanding officer of the 803rd Naval Air Squadron, who were the first to operate the Scimitar.
Okay. All right. Anything else on the Scimitar? Right, let's move on to our final one. We've got here 200 or something planes. We've got here the Supermarine Swift Foxtrot Romeo 5. What have we got on this little belter?
She pretty. We got that.
Yeah.
She was
Swelling.
introduced in 54, retired 67.
So later than the Sabre. Okay. What kind of engine have we got in there?
One Rolls-Royce
Single
Avon, but it does have afterburner now.
So they're quite powerful when they had afterburners on. What power are you? What rate are you?
9,450 pounds.
Okay. And do we have a wing sweep? And what kind of speed are we cooking on?
At sea level, it's got a wing sweep, and at sea level, we're looking at 713 miles an hour. I'm not entirely sure what that is.
That's transonic. That's almost breaking the sound barrier. So I'm not sure if this is supersonic or not. We've got top speed up high.
Not up high, not at altitude. No, it's not listed.
Okay, so we're not entirely sure about that. Weaponry.
Just 2 30mm Aiden cannons and provisions for bombs and rockets. So we've got no missiles anymore. But then again, this was 54. This looks like it was introduced before the Scimitar.
Yeah, but remember, let's not feel too sorry for it. Remember, we got a Sabre back in the late 40s, I think, the first flight. And that had missiles after only a few years. So it does sound a little bit behind the times not to have Sidewinders on a test flight of 54 or enter service on 54. But okay, fair enough.
There you go. So the Mark 7 single-seat fighter aircraft fitted with a lengthened nose to accommodate a radar, armed with 4 30mm Aiden cannons and 4 Fairy Fireflash air threats.
There's more like it. Yeah. Right. So we did have the early version missiles there. That sounds a bit more along the times. Okay. Sounds like a interesting little plane, actually. I'd quite like to look into it a bit more. Afterburning Avon, got a little bit of speed, not too fast, early radar, interesting. Right, we've made it to the end.
This one.
What's the next one?
I can't see it on here, but it's one of the most iconic British low-level nuclear strike aircraft ever built, and it's not on here. The Blackburn Buccaneer.
There's no Buccaneer. Well, hang on. Buccaneer wasn't a fighter, was it? This is fighters only, remember?
It was a fighter bomber.
Okay, well, I want to ask you to carry on, Auntie, but you sound like a robot. Are you downloading something?
Everybody's sounding like
Everybody stands saying that.
Alright, just carry on. Tell us about the Buccaneer. I'm aware of it, because I remember it had an unbelievable service history, but I don't know a lot about it, so far away, and if someone can get a picture up on media, that would be handy.
Well, it was built and first flown in 1958, introduced into the service in 1962. It was a carrier-borne attack aircraft built specially for the Royal Navy, and it ended up in the RAF's hands because we didn't pick up the General Dynamics F111 because of all the leaky fuel tank problems and things, everything else that went with it. It was in service up until 1994. Hello, what's that? It was the aircraft of choice that was originally tasked to go to the Falklands and drop bombs on the runway, but it just couldn't make the distance. But it was the ideal aircraft for it. But like I say, it was a low-level attack aircraft, also used as a fighter within the Navy, I believe. But it was also nuclear capable.
Nuclear capable, and that's a massive.
Obviously.
Why did it have such a big service span? Do we think? What was good about it?
It was an excellent, stable platform for low-level flying. Pilots who flew it said, you could virtually take your hand off the stick at low level in turbulent air. It would just smoothly ride across the ground.
It's a good design.
Brilliant design. Very reliable as well, as I understand.
Yeah, 17th of July 1962. It was introduced on 31st of March 1944. It was withdrawn from service. That's a long
1994.
94.
Yeah, so that's what I thought they said.
Okay, and the thing I remember about it is the whopping great brake at the back, and it kind of separates sideways.
Yes.
How cool was that?
Yeah, it had a high tailplane.
Yeah.
Yeah, for carrier landings. That's what that was for.
And what kind of, out of interest, because this is a fighter thing, what kind of air-to-air ordnance did it have? Did it have some sidewinders?
Just checking.
You guys done the English Electric Lightning yet?
Yeah, I missed that, mate.
Not so quick on the draw in there, critical.
I just haven't been here for some of that aircraft because Russell's my Jimmy's.
It could carry 4 Matra rocket pods, 2 AIM-9 sidewinders for self-defense,
Yeah.
2 AS-37 Martel missiles, or 4 Sea Eagle missiles, which are anti-ship, I believe.
Beautiful.
It could also carry unguided bombs, laser-guided bombs, as well as the Redbeard or WE-177 tactical nuclear bombs.
Of course.
I think it was also using Desert Storm as laser designator.
I remember that.
Aircraft.
I remember the desert camo ones flying about. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, carries ECM
For the
pods.
Persian Gulf during the 1991 Gulf War.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can carry ECM pods, PAVE, spike laser designator pods, buddy refueling packs, or drop tanks for extended range and lighter time.
Cool. All right, let's tie it up then, guys. I hope you've enjoyed the series. That's 13 hours of video to go through if you want to watch that series. So cool. Yeah, next we're going to work out some bombers, I suppose, or some seed aircraft, or some reconnaissance. I dare say we'll see. But thanks to everyone who's pitched in and helped, and whoever did this original video, very useful. Picture, very useful of you. Other than that, we're going to head off, and we'll see you later.